Good afternoon, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be presenting this session today about empowering hydropower, about dam safety. The power of hydropower is immense. It brings together one of the 5 elements of nature, water, which has been around for perhaps more than 4 billion years, and human technological innovation. Hydropower today is the world's largest source of renewable energy, supplying, according to the International Hydropower Association, 16% of global electricity demand. So recent estimates indicate that 1,300 gigawatts of new hydropower capacity will be needed by 2050 to limit the global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius, as set by the Paris Agreement. So all over the world, countries have committed to hydropower to supply affordable energy with net zero emissions by 2050. However, if not properly designed, hydropower projects could have tremendous negative impacts on local communities and the environment. And the large investments that countries are doing on hydropower could be completely lost. These seriously compromise countries' development goals and our global dream of a world free of poverty on a livable planet. So hydropower projects encompass risks from the dams and to the dams. For example, last year in Sikkim, in India, a glacial lake outburst flood completely destroyed the dam, killing about 100 people. This is just one among many other examples. In today's session, we will discuss case studies from Nepal, Nigeria, and Ukraine, and we will hear from 4 specialists about methods to assess these risks, including their cascading effects and solutions to build hydropower resilience for a sustainable future. So our first speaker is Mark Zelezniak, who is a visitor professor at Fukushima University. Since 1986, he has been responsible for developing and implementing a decision support system for radioactive contamination in rivers affected by the Chernobyl accident. As a professor at Fukushima University, he researched radionuclide transport in rivers contaminated after the Fukushima Daiichi accident. And since 2022, he has participated in projects assessing the environmental impact of war in Ukraine. So welcome to Mark.
Thank you for introduction, Karina. And the risk is a key word of our forum. And we professionals who provide the risk assessment, sometimes they're doing also their scientific life, but they never have possibility to check how their assessment good or not very good. But such happens that in my scientific life, I have several situations that our risk assessment, risk prediction, we have possibility to check. Of course, people who predict tsunami defense dikes near Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plants, people who made location of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant upstream Kyiv city, 3 million population city, they make on their level of knowledge also risk assessment, and we know that some of the assessment was wrong, unfortunately. In my life, unfortunately, I have several possibilities to check our risk assessment, and one of them is recently. Recently, it means that I am here because, as many people, technical professionals, we're working in the World Bank program, and we started in year 2023, in the beginning of 2023 project about Nigeria, about, we'll say, my colleague Maxim Gusev. And I continue work remotely with my former Kyiv team, and we implement, also involve Ukrainian modelers to this Nigerian project. But also, starting from the autumn of 2022, when start to be known that explosion is put by Russian army to hydropower plant on the Dnieper River, we start to provide modeling of the situation nearby this nuclear hydropower plant. But first of all, I will say about the tools that we use. In principle, now the main modeling of the flooding is based on two-dimensional equation, and different group, well-known brand names in this field, in the aquatic hydraulics, they develop contemporary models. And such happens that after Chernobyl, when situation was that, as Karina told, I was involved in Chernobyl problems starting from 1986. It was absolutely secret, in this information. We have not any contact with the foreign scientists where we start Chernobyl study. Only after Iron Curtain was destroyed in beginning of 90s, we have started real contact with abroad scientists. So we make in our institute our own modeling system. In principle, it was developed step by step, and now in the level of the frontline software for hydraulic modeling, such as Mike 21, two-dimensional version of Delft 3D, Telemac, and several others. It's based on non-structural grid, and also what is important, we use the model could be used not only on the supercomputers, but also on the normal PC, even notebook, with a powerful graphical card, because our model working not only on the normal computer, also working on the GPU. And it was important because in such situation you could make calculation for the big areas. Here the example of testing of our model is well-known problem of the tsunami approach coast of Sendai Bay and Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. Model will also describe wetting and drying, how territory you could see in larger scale. And to make proper modeling and to achieve good comparison with experimental data, you should have very fine grid. You should big computational power. Benefit of our approach is that we could use this very powerful computation for very big grids on the rather non-expensive computers. Now I will say about situation in Ukraine. I'm sorry, point. Okay, sorry. Thank you. Okay. It's moved, but how? It's how to move. How could point something to point? We have this red spot to show something. Okay. So, general situation in hydropower in Ukraine. You see the system of the 6 big reservoirs. And as I told you, one of these reservoirs, Kyiv Reservoir, is just upstream city of Kyiv, on the tributary of Dnieper River, is the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Then is a set of the 6 reservoirs. Kakhovka Reservoir, now everybody knows this name, is the largest of the system of reservoirs, the length of 200 kilometers, very huge reservoir, 18 cubic kilometers. And you could see how it looks like this hydropower plant before it was destroyed. And nearby you see how it looks like the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant that in some sense similar to Fukushima, also stayed on the coast of the border. And Zaporizhzhia also use for cooling water from the nearby water body, in this case, water of Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And when here in this map is a map of the military, I don't like word conflict, it's not conflict. It's not conflict. We have not any conflict with Russia. Ukraine, peaceful country, but it was aggressive war. And Russian army attacked Ukraine. Now this red is a territory still occupied by Russian army. Green is territory that was occupied, but due to Ukrainian army, they was kicked out from this green territory. But this hydropower plant, in the summer of beginning of the summer a year ago, was occupied by Russian army. And you see here the building of the hydropower plant and all this construction, and also they control also all this dike. And we started the simulation, as I told, in autumn 2022. Okay. And to do this, we make computational grid that cover fully the territory of Kakhovka Reservoir. And why it was important? Because when it may be a technical question, but it's important to point out on it. Usually, the main weak point is the hydraulic modeling of the dam break is boundary condition on the break. Because, as usual, people use some semi-empirical formula for the calculation discharge in the breach. But due to this possibility to apply very big calculation network, as written here, we use calculation network with 7.5 million cells, computational cells. It includes fully territory of Kakhovka Reservoir, all territory from Kakhovka Reservoir up to the Black Sea, and also we covered by the rare grid also of the Black Sea. And therefore, when we provide simulation of the dam breach, we not use any empirical formula. We simply destroy dike in computer. We open the gate. And now it's not boundary condition. Now discharge on the break is calculated as an internal, in the internal cells of the of our model. And you see here how the first 5 minutes breach is open. After that, wave starting to propagate it downstream. It propagated up to the island downstream and some reflection way. So step by step, we calculated all this territory. And as a result, in the February of 2023, half year before the accident, we present to Ukrainian authorities result of our calculation. As you see what will be the result. You see river Dnieper downstream hydropower plant, and here you see how the territory was flooded in our calculation. This maps was prepared in the GIS formats and presented to our state service of emergency situation. But I was wake up early morning in 6th of June. This day, it happens. And initial information that came in the Russian mass media was that is crazy Ukrainians destroy, bombing their own hydropower plant. But interesting that hydraulic demonstrates that situation was quite different. So, in principle, during this one day, in our model, we destroy 400 meters of the dike of hydropower plant, and practically it happens this night from the 5th to 6th June 2023. You see now here how looks from the satellite image of planet nuclear hydropower plant before this situation. Here you see how it looks like destroyed from the satellite, and here a picture taken from the Russian occupied site. And now you see one of the settlements that practically fully flooded due to this explosion. And here, of course, now we have possibility to make detailed information from Ukrainian side, but we have not possibility to take data from the still occupied territory by Russians. And I will demonstrate later some monitoring data, but most important what figure of the satellite picture, because here I repeat our map that was calculated before the accident. Here you see some of the pictures. What was flooded mostly is the city of Kherson, southern part of the city of Kherson, and city Oleshki, that is on the other side of the river. And here, pink, it's reconstructed data from the satellite of the flooded territory. And yellow line is a territory border that was calculated in our model. You see very good comparison, and more detail is presented on this slide, where also in the MODIS satellite, you could see the flooded territory, and here yellow line is a line that was calculated in our calculations. We also have data about how change monitoring data, dynamic of the change of this reservoir. Reservoirs start to be empty very quickly during the several days. I tell you that we provide very good forecasting of the maximum flooding, but we make one mistake. We see in the calculation, not mistake, but not fully prediction, that the speed of the, you see here how the water peak in the Kherson, and you see that it's 1.5 days, practically after 24 hours, it was near the peak. And after that, it starts to be lower and lower. And here you see it's a point near opposite nuclear power plant where water level declined very quickly. And we see in the measurements that diminishing, peak we predict very good, but diminishing of the water level was much quicker than we predict. Water was fall out from this reservoir much quicker, and it was only one explanation for this. It was fully destroying in the one moment of all this dike. It was impossible to do by the bombing. It was did by the explosion that put into the dike. And as a result, when the fully dike was destroyed, water start provide the erosion of the bottom, and size of this bridge start increase due to the increasing of the bottom erosion. We could check this only after this territory will be deoccupied, because now it's impossible to provide measurements there. But we are absolutely sure that it was no any other physical explanation why water come from the reservoir much quicker than we predicted, with a good prediction from the beginning. And I will return back to, only for a few final words. Thank you for your attention. How to put, could I put on the full screen? Now after this result is more trust to our modeling and our calculation, and we now have special task from the state structure of Ukraine about calculation potential risk for another nuclear power plants, because what war continue. This hydropower plant, Dnipro gas, was attacked recently by Russian rocket missiles. This near upstream Kyiv, Kakhovka reservoir, Kyiv reservoir, also under the risk. So now our team continue calculation for the risk scenario for these reservoirs. But I hope that due to international support, including Japan and other countries, war will be stopped, and we will have the possibility to check this our calculation I prefer not to have this possibility. Thank you.
So now from Ukraine, we are going to Nigeria. And our second presenter is Maxim Guziev. He's a Ukrainian scientist that has worked on various water-related projects across the Asia-Pacific and Africa regions. He's currently an associate professor at the Fukushima University, where he implemented a World Bank project on risk assessment of dam break flooding in Nigeria. So welcome to Maxim.
Karina, thank you very much for the kind introduction. Yes, and actually before coming to the Fukushima University, I was almost 10 years a research member at the International Center for Water Hazard and Risk Management, ICHARM, which they had a session this morning about the climate change impacts on the infrastructure. But today, so my name is Maxim Guziev, and with my colleagues, Professor Kenji Namba, Mark Zhelezniak, as well as my colleagues from Ukraine, Maxim Sorokin and Alexei Ishchuk, I will talk about assessing population and agricultural exposure for 3 dams in Nigeria. So this work was carried out under the Transforming Irrigation Management in Nigeria project, called TRIMMING in short, and the results that we were provided within a short period of this project using the technology you heard from Professor Zhelezniak's presentation, which was validated in Ukraine, unfortunately, and applied it to the dams in Nigeria for support of the next upcoming project called Sustainable Power and Irrigation for Nigeria. So here we share, this is the online, the image here is a screenshot that we held a workshop, half-day workshop online in Fukushima University office. So here is us with myself, Professor Zhelezniak, Professor Namba, and from Nigeria at World Bank Abuja office, we had members of Nigeria Federal Ministry for Water Resources. So we shared our results, we got some feedback, and we all together we brainstormed how we could utilize this modeling technology to improve not only the dam safety, but also the operation of water releases, because this is actually a very important point I will be mentioning later. So currently situation in Nigeria, there are many large dams that have been underutilized. Such of these are Goronia, Zobe, Tiga, Dadinkova, and this Tiga is shown on the right-hand side. Here on the left-hand side, you show the location of Goronia and Zobe dams with the, like shown by triangles. I'll try to get the pointer, just a second. Yeah, so here the Goronia, Zobe, Tiga, and the reservoir elevation, and this is the model domain that downstream, which is an important area of the Kano city, which is a population of 11 million people, and that was actually affected by in the year of 2022, there was a big flood due to dam overflow, which is Tiga reservoir capacity is 2 billion cubic meters. So this is what happened in the downstream flood occurred due to the Tiga dam overflow, causing 23 fatalities, serious injuries, destroying 12,000 houses, and washing away about 16,000 farms. And this is overflow is actually it's really dangerous situation for dam safety, which is dam managers try to avoid as much as possible, meaning that you have floodgates are open, so you're fully discharging water. The emergency spillway is operational, but the water is inflowing into the reservoir, and if the dam is overflown, it's a really high possibility that the structure will collapse. And to prevent this is they try to release water as much as possible, and this is the video of the downstream of the Tiga dam on some video bloggers, and you see that people actually looking at the water, just like really enjoying themselves, I guess, or in a state of shock, but people still walking across the bridge, and this without any safety or risk considerations. So we simulated, with Professor Zhelezniak and his team, we simulated this scenario, and we looked at of course, we didn't, due to the short duration of the project, essentially half a year, to deliver the results, we had to rely on the satellite images like we had before. And here I'm showing on the left the image from the 14th of September, so which is about a week after the overflow discharge. And then this is 26th of September. If I zoom in, you could see that how the images are merged. And if you look at the older dates, you see that the yellow line is the simulation of the maximum flood inundation area. And you see that the water is receding here. But if you look at the earlier images, you see that pretty much the model coincides pretty well with the with satellite images of the flood extent. Here on the red are the different local government authorities that have been affected by the flood and are reporting the fatalities and damages. If we look at how much actually the people are affected in this scenario, so we take 100-year, this is the event on September 8, 2022, was roughly estimated to be 100-year flood return period, and also looking at the larger one, so 1,000-year return period, we see that a pretty much similar number of affected people. The maximum is 224,000 people, and then about 1,000 square kilometers affected. So if we now compare these numbers, which is really a large number, but if we compare to the dam break scenarios, we actually will see much larger impacts. So here I'm showing to you that this is how the model, the structure looks like in terms of elevation. We introduced two breaches. In the middle, 950-meter bridge, and on the right-hand side, 600-meter bridge. If you start the simulation, so the reservoir is full, the breach occurred, and after 1 minute, you see how the water gushing through the opening, so two different scenarios. Then we can compare the inundation in the upstream area. So essentially, the Kano city is around here, and the same as downstream area. If you just looking at just the extent and the depth is very high, like more than 4 meters in dark blue, and we see that the extent is pretty similar in both breaches scenarios. If you look at the population, we also see similar numbers, but larger, more affected people were at 950 meters breach width, about 451,000, and the area, agricultural area, about 1,300. So I'm not going to go too much into the numbers, but so essentially we have 2 to 3 times higher impacts for the downstream area and population due to the dam break and different breach where it occurred, the width and location of the breach can affect the situation. So in the both simulations, the Kano city was not affected, so that was a good news for local stakeholders. Now moving into Zobe Dam, so this is dam, we're introducing breach on this side and in here, 400 meters and 500 meters. Looking at the simulation, you start to see the water running after 5 minutes. You see the water is moving from the reservoir to downstream area. And we look at the inundated area in the upstream and downstream. So we see that extent, if you compare two scenarios, although the breach width is not so much different, we see a big difference in the extent of the flooding and as well as the depth of the flooding. So we see this is actually will be reflected in the numbers if we calculate flood-affected people in a flooded agricultural area. So we have almost 1.5 to 2 times larger impacts, although the breach is not really big difference in terms of width. So the location of the breach is also plays a major role. Moving to the Goronyo Dam, so this is the dam here introduced 900-meter breach and 600-meter breach on this side. Same situation, the water is running. After 5 minutes, we see the inundation upstream and the downstream, and we see that much larger extent for 900-meter breach than 600-meter breach, as well as the depths of the inundation. Again, this is it is reflected by the numbers of flood-affected people and flood agriculture area, roughly more people than areas. So in summary, so we share these results and with experts from the Ministry of Water Resources, Federal Ministry of Water Resources, and that actually they were really interested in utilizing this methodology since a lot of efforts goes to develop the model and introducing now not only looking at the dam break, but also into how we can actually allocate water or develop the simulation for flood control, water discharge, irrigation downstream, so how we can support multi-purpose dam operation, essentially, including the power generation, of course. So now, this, as I mentioned, this is, can be used for these 3 dams and will be used in the next project. We also deliver the flood depth map to the ministry, giving them the opportunity to work with the maps and distribute them to local authorities to develop flood emergency plans and preparedness, especially considering the lack of risk awareness for flooding, especially if they know that farmlands are washed away and the banks of the rivers are eroding, and people just watching and looking at that without any consideration of their safety. So I think there's a lot of work to be done in terms of risk, especially considering climate change impact assessment and other uncertainties that to achieving sustainable development goals. And with that, I finish my presentation. And yeah, this is the Dadinkova Dam, 2.8 billion cubic meters. You see a lot of siltation in the reservoir, so there's a lot of work need to be provided for Nigeria. Thank you very much for your attention.
So these 2 presentations were examples of risks from the structure, from the dam. What can happen if there is a dam failure? The next presentation is about the risks to the structure, to these hydropower investments. And our next speaker is Igunyuwari. Igunyuwari is a disaster risk management specialist with the World Bank. He's based in Nepal, where he co-leads disaster risk management programs, technical assistance, and policy dialogue. He also leads efforts to integrate disruptive technology in climate resilience in operations across Nepal, India, and Pakistan, focusing on multi-hazard risk assessment, post-disaster damage assessment, and infrastructure project design and implementation in the housing, transport, water, and energy sectors. So welcome, Igunyuwari.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I think, I really enjoyed listening to the presentation from Nigeria because I'm from Nigeria. So it was good to see some of the efforts that is going on there. Today I'll be talking about Nepal's use case, just sharing some examples of some of the impacts of multiple hazards on infrastructure development, but also sharing some of the ways that we are rethinking how hydropower infrastructure can be developed in Nepal to make sure that they are more resilient, of course, to adapt to some of these changes in climate and also some of the human-induced factors as well that can affect hydropower infrastructure development. Just to set a little bit of context on Nepal, maybe a lot of people here know about Nepal, but Nepal is one of those countries that is most prone to both climate and human-induced hazards, right? And I think one of the most fascinating things about how hazards occur in Nepal is that it's not just one hazard, right? So, many times you have multiple hazards, from earthquakes to floods to landslide. And in some instances, you even have these hazards interacting with each other, right? So be it an earthquake that happened many years ago, causing changes in ground motion, and over time this could lead to landslide, and it could escalate to flood and debris flow, and over a short period of time you can have multiple hazards cascading and causing severe issues, or this could even happen over years slowly, right? So in Nepal's context, this is something to always think about, especially when you're trying to design infrastructures, right? So I think with this context, so the image you can see to the right there is basically an image of the hydropower projects. Some of them are ongoing, some are planned, right? And some of them are being surveyed for some of these developments to happen. So with this scope of work being planned, over time, and with the whole country being vulnerable to various hazards, it is definitely very important, that we rethink how, infrastructures like this are developed in a context where it can be exposed to multiple hazards. I would like to share one of the use cases, and this is from 2021 in an area called Melamshi, right? And this was for a water supply project not necessarily a hydropower project, but it provides, a very recent example of how things can go very bad very fast, right? And this event, like you can see on the graph there, that kind of shows the longitude of how these different hazards cascaded over time, right? Starting from the 2015 earthquake, that was one of the most severe earthquake, right? That continuously led to slow movement, in hills over time, right? And consequently, when there's rain and there's temperature fluctuations, right, then glaciers begin to melt. Then as a result of all of these, landslides begin to happen. Then when debris flows, then you have something like landslide, dam, outboard floods happening as well. So over a short period of time, from like June to August, right, it shows how the scenario changed, and it caused a whole lot of impact there. So in the next image here, we're basically showing an assessment that the team did looking at land displacement over time, right? And in the image, let me see if you can. Is there something showing there? No. Okay. I'm just trying to point at the thing. But basically, what is showing here is looking at how synthetic aperture radar was used to detect how land displacement is happening in this river basin over time, right? And you can see these slow movements of like hundreds of millimeters happening per year. But over time, right, everything accumulates, right? And from basic ground motion, then there was glacial lake outburst flood, and basically, over a short period of time, there was very serious incidents happening here. Then additionally, our team also used drone technology to also be able to assess how sediment flow has been happening in this area, right? And we can see like almost 40 million cubic meters of debris was deposited in this area, right? And in this situation here, you can even see that there's a lake damming that is happening there as well. So, in the next few years, if there's some other incident that could happen here, all of these debris may be flowing downstream again. And basically, this area is in the perpetual state of exposure to risks, and anything can happen at any time, right? So, if you're working in this type of space, it's definitely important that, you look at how disaster resilience can be integrated in how some of these infrastructures are being designed and implemented. So here, I'm just showing a picture of the headworks that was damaged, right? About 25 meters of debris was deposited, as you can see in the yellow line that we have there. You can see where that flag was, in the beginning, and where it is right now, right? And you can also see like the before and after images of the impact that happened to the headworks in those areas, right? Additionally, we also undertook some flood modeling as well, right? And beyond the infrastructure, and when you go downstream as well, and this is why, when infrastructures are built, when development is happening downstream of an infrastructure, all of these things need to be taken into account, right? Because you have risks to the infrastructure and you have risks from the infrastructure as well. And in this case, all of these bridges and even settlements that were downstream were also affected and also being washed away by the flood and landslide event. So this is a recent example from Sikkim in India that happened in September 2003, right? And this was a dam that was basically completed already, right? And when this globe incident occurred, and it took about, I think it was about 20-something minutes, the whole dam was washed away. And this is a dam that took so many years to construct, right? And I think there were lots of factors that contributed to this, from the glove itself. But I think one important lesson that came out from here is that even the early warning systems that were in place to be able to warn failed, right? So at that time, if at least the early warning system was quite functional, maybe it would provide some information to either open a diversion tunnel, right? And for some of these waters to be diverted, and maybe this dam would have been saved. So I think, more importantly, as much as, you come up with all of these early warning systems, it's important that they remain operational, because, we've seen in different instances that it's easy to install the systems, but over time, to maintain and to ensure that the information coming from those systems are used, becomes a bit of an issue, right? So here, this is just one of the examples of like a post-disaster damage assessment that showed, how the glacial lake itself was being affected, right? And as part of the whole idea of rethinking how infrastructure should be developed, right? I think technology plays an important role, right? I think the next presenter, of course, will be going into details of how technology can help us here. Right? But beyond just being able to assess post-disaster, we want to be able to use technology to actually monitor, right, and to also provide guidance on how infrastructure can be developed and it can be operated and maintained over time as well. So these are a few examples from there. So this is a recent, also not so recent, maybe this happened in 2014, 2015. But why this example is important and I just wanted to share was also to show that, this incident occurred as a result of 3 incidences that happened over time, right? So it wasn't just like the Melamshi use case, and the Sikkim use case that just happened, over a short period of time, right? This started with a landslide event that occurred in 2014, right? Then followed by the 2015 earthquake event also that led to a lot of ground shaking, right? Then followed by gloves, which interestingly for Nepal, this was a transboundary globe that was not even in Nepal, right? So as part of the overall thinking of how hydropower infrastructure or any infrastructure is developed, if some of these infrastructures are developed within a transboundary basin, it becomes also important that you're able to monitor any hazards that may be coming in from another country as well. Like in this case, I think this was from China, right? So I think, and this is where also technology, of course, can be useful, especially in a context where data sharing becomes a big issue, right? So it's important to be able to monitor what hazards that your infrastructure is exposed to going forward. So coming down to the new project that the World Bank is working with the government of Nepal to develop, and why we are trying to rethink how disaster risk management needs to be integrated into hydropower infrastructure development, right? We have come up with the disaster risk management action plan that needs to be implemented as part of the overall design and implementation and even the monitoring and the maintenance of this infrastructure going forward, right? So the Upper Arun project, which I think is about 1,061 megawatt of energy would be generated from this infrastructure, right? We've come up with 5 areas that needs to be addressed in terms of how we can manage disaster risks when it comes to infrastructure development, right? One of them, of course, being an integrated multi-hazard risk assessment. From the examples that we've shared, we can see that there are many hazards that would affect such an infrastructure, right? In Nigeria's case, it's just flood, right? And in this case, you have floods, you have earthquakes, you have landslide, you have those in the country, you have those in other countries. So, so there are so many elements to think about. And I think the first step is to understand, first understand the hazard, but also understand their interactions as well, be it compounding hazard that one would happen, then the other one will happen over time, or cascading hazard that one, is a precursor for another one to happen. So, this kind of thinking definitely needs to go into, how infrastructures are being designed. Then the next element, of course, is monitoring and early warning systems, right? In the case of Sikkim, we can see that some of the early warning system failed, right? But in this case for Nepal, I think that's an important lesson, and it's also something to think about, because we need to think about how early warning system can be used to monitor different hazards, but also how this information will be communicated as well and will be used for emergency preparedness, right? Which is the third phase. So this is basically, what would you do if you have information that an impending hazard is coming your way, or if a hazard has arrived, right, and it's causing disruption. So who are all of those parties that need to come into play, right, for you to be able to manage this disaster? The next one, I think, which is also critical, is also the technical measures, both engineering and non-engineering measures that needs to be put in place, right, depending on the type of exposure, right? Then the next one, of course, is capacity building, and also looking at institutional coordinations as well, because various parties needs to come in here. I think one important point to highlight here, which you can see from the slide, is that for the Arun Basin, you have about 17 potentially dangerous lakes in the area, right? Many in Nepal and many in Tibet Basin in China, right? And two of them, of course, are the most critical. One is the Lower Barun Lake, which is in Nepal. Then there is another lake that is in China as well. So as part of the overall thinking on how this is to be done, there's also a lot of room for use of technology, including remote sensing, to continuously monitor these lakes that have high risks to the project. So I think I've highlighted a little bit about this, but one of the things that Nepal is doing, and from our side we're also working with them, is to come up with a framework for multi-hazard risk assessment. Because what happens is that when you have different parties that are active in the DRM space within a country, many people tend to use different methodologies, right? And sometimes the output that comes out are not compatible, right? And in several instances, this output can also not be integrated into the existing systems for decision making as well. So one of the things that the government is trying to do is to harmonize the approach for multi-hazard risk assessment and to be able to use that data to inform decision making. So that definitely goes straight into the integrated multi-hazard risk assessment approach, and also looking at different hazards as well, and also looking at their interactions. The early warning and reporting system, I think this is also a very critical one, looking at a combination of approaches, be it ground-based approach, satellite-based approach, looking upstream, but looking downstream as well, because definitely some of the communities that are downstream of this kind of infrastructure, need to be able to benefit from this type of information as well on how they can manage the risk that is coming their way. And of course, most importantly, these systems need to remain continuously functional. On the emergency preparedness aspect, I've highlighted this a bit as well, but also, we need to develop plans for risk management, looking at different scenarios, looking at who is responsible for different types of hazard, because, in Nepal's context, for instance, disaster risk management is the responsibility of the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Authority, right? But when you go to flood, there's the Department of Hydrology and Meteorology. When you go to landslide, there's the Departments of Mines and Geology. So depending on the hazard that you're looking at, there are different parties that are responsible for managing or monitoring or reporting or modeling those hazards. So all of these parties, of course, need to come together, right, to be able to develop an integrated solution. Then also, of course, evacuation protocol. So in a worst-case scenario, right, then how do people evacuate? So all of these things need to be planned in advance. There need to be continuous drills, planning, and also be able to train people on how to respond when there's an emergency. Then looking at the physical infrastructures, that need to be put in place to reduce the risks, right? Like I highlighted earlier, one of the main risks to the program is the Lower Barun Lake, right? One of the measures that is being considered is how to dewater this lake, right? And we are working closely and having discussions with UNDP, right? And looking at some of the approaches and measures that can be used to lower this lake, because we can see from the recent examples in India and in Nepal as well, right? If a lake could pose a risk, then there's definitely, the need to do something about it. In many instances, there will also be need for slope stabilization and different actions that needs to be taken. I think the last aspect is basically continuous capacity building. So different experts need to come together in this case, from hydrologists, from Earth observation experts, to geologists, to seismologists, climate disaster risk management. But different parties, of course, need to come together, right, to be able to build their capacity, but also have the institutional coordination to be able to get things done. One point that is important to highlight, right, when we have this type of discussions, we see that there's different technologies that we can, easily adapt and apply in different countries. But one of the things that is important to push is the need for ownership and for capacity building, so that, there's limited reliance on external forces, right, to be able to implement a solution. Because you can have the best solution, but if the people don't have the capacity to implement it, then definitely those solutions will fail in the long term. So we are pushing to build in-country expertise and also to build local capacity and ownership, of any solution that comes into the overall context of this. So that's all from my presentation. So thank you very much.
So our last presentation is about one of the technologies that is currently available to assess these risks. So our last speaker is Asuka Washi, who is a GIS remote sensing engineer with over 15 years of consulting experience in Japan and Southeast Asia. Since 2008, she has worked as an environmental consultant on forest GIS and remote sensing projects for organizations like the Government of Japan, JICA, and UNDP. She's currently the manager of customer engineering at Synspective, overseeing client projects such as dam monitoring. So welcome, Asuka.
I'm so short. Me too. Okay. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Asuka Wachi from Synspective. Let me introduce our company shortly. We founded in 2018, and we manufactured a small SAR satellite constellation. The SAR satellite can penetrate our cloud, and we also observe the data in nighttime. So our data frequency is really high. And we are now making the 30 satellite constellation now. And if we can achieve this goal, there are 2 or 3 hours in the frequency is observed. Today, I'm focused on the dam structure monitoring. So as you all may know, a dam has a lot of threat to the failure. Like climate change, the increase the water runoff into reservoirs, seismic movement, and so on. And also there are a lot of high risk areas, high mountain dams and old dams. We need to manage our dam by something. And then I try to introduce the solution, land displacement monitoring, that we are calling as LDM. Usually in dam monitoring, we use the leveling survey on the ground, or the GNSS survey, or the drone survey, and a lot of our stuff we can use. But usually the survey is only one point, or point and point, but it's not the surface or monitoring. So the solution is used over 15 images, and we compare the up pair of the image. Then we will compare the shift of the phase. The shift of the phase means the facilitate or displacement. So that we are using our own algorithm, and they're providing our data through cloud-based data platform. And the Synspective land displacement monitoring characteristic is the millimeter detail and cost-effective for a large area. And we apply a lot of infrastructure monitoring. There are also the dam monitoring. I will show what is the benefit of Synspective LDM solution. And this is historical analysis that we are using at our over 5 archives, or 5 years archives are their data, and they're extremely large area and one time, and the proactive monitoring to reduce potential dam maintenance cost, and early detection from frequent monitoring, and detect and then understand large-scale millimeter level ground change not seen by optical sensors, the efficient resource or prioritization to site surveys and maintenance target, and understanding of land stability for pre-assessment and during the construction of the dam. This is the sample analysis for dam monitoring that we can see. Yep. This area is the dam structure. The deep or red color means the high subsidence happen. So we need to check this area more carefully. And also we can see the other structures such as the powerhouses and what happened in the powerhouses. There is no subsidence or not, that we can check. And also we can monitor the temporal data change. So we can see the seasonal annual variability of stress on the dam structure is observed. Usually, dam or water level is changing in the season. For example, in Japan, now is the rainy season, and the rainy season continue to around August. So the water level is higher. The dam have the more pressure than other season. So, and in the winter season, the water level is going down. So then the dam structure, they're moving a slightly seasonal change. So we can observe that change too. In addition, we can observe dam surrounding areas. That is in their case, the deeper orange area is having subsidence. So the monitoring of the dam surrounding areas of these areas for subsidence, which is an indicator for landslide occurrence, though affecting the reservoir capacity. Usually, some bigger dam have the houses in the dam area, so the failure, where is the risk of the failure is really important, and this is useful data. Okay, finally, we will show the 3 vision of the future, enhancing dam monitor with SAR technology. The one is our solution will provide in GIS-friendly format already, so they're easy to connect to the other infrastructure monitoring systems. So we are now ready to collaborate with other systems. In the future, a near real-time alert function will be put into practice when we achieve our 30 satellites constellation. And finally, the information will be used for sustainability planning of construction of infrastructure. Yeah, thank you so much. This is it. Thank you so much for your time.
So I am the one that is between you and the coffee break, so I'm going to be now very brief. So I think from all these presentations, we can highlight that enhancing resilience in the hydropower sector involves 4 key factors. Technical and financial solutions to manage the human, environmental, and financial risks. Effective policies for setting the direction and priorities, facilitating the integration of resilience into broader development plans. Institutional capacity to strengthen the ability of institutions to plan and execute resilience programs in the hydropower sector and to adapt and respond to changing circumstances and emerging risks. And finally, convening power, or the ability to bring together different stakeholders to mobilize support and commitment from policymakers, private sector, development partners, and the public. So together, these elements, like water, are essential for empowering hydropower. So thank you very much for your participation today. I hope you can interact with the speakers also during the coffee break. Thank you. Enjoy the conference.